I'm co-host James Ash.
And I'm co-host Phil Scaife.
Welcome to the Business Lockdown. Well, that's the best introduction we've ever had, Lara.
With bringing buzz.
Yeah, and I think we'll keep that as well.
Okay.
So on today's show, it brings me great pleasure to introduce Lara Jensen. Lara is and has been killing it in the fashion world for many years now. Whole girl, certainly done good.
Yes.
Works with the likes of Madonna, Lady Gaga, Kylie Minogue. We will cover more and more as we speak on this episode. But welcome, Lara.
Hello.
Hi, Lara.
Hi.
How is the world of fashion coping at the moment, or isn't the world of fashion coping, Lara? There's an easy one to start with.
Gosh, well, it's just so strange. I mean, most people have gone on to this. How do I say? It's been very odd looking at my feed. Because the people that it seems that if you're kind of brands are carrying on oblivious and just advertising and just not really recognizing the situation or the humanity of the situation at the moment, it doesn't seem to be received very well. I mean, I'm in a weird place in the fashion world in the fact that I'm one of the it's almost like I'm a behind the scenes person, so I'm not like very much a face of it. So my brand isn't to do with representing all of the time, and not to do with I don't advertise. I'm very much someone that receives commissions, and from a commission side, I don't know if that makes sense, but from a commission side, everybody's gone dead. Stylists who I work with, they're all in quarantine or lockdown, and they've stopped kind of posting flashy pictures of what they're kind of wearing, and they're kind of posting pictures of them in bed watching Tiger King and on Netflix. And everybody's kind of like taken their makeup off, and you kind of seeing like the reality behind this kind of very superficial fashion world. And the more reality that seems to be being represented, the more it seems to be. And that's what I was kind of trying to say at the beginning, is that this kind of very much fashion is always about faking it until you're making it, or it's about putting out the best and the cleanest version image of yourself. And for the first time, that's not really being received in a positive way. So, if your brand's not recognizing or making masks for people, or if they're not understanding that, we're going through a world recession possibly at the moment, and so trying to advertise a 15,000 Swarovski crystal jacket to somebody is probably not going to be totally welcomed, when a lot of your fan base, as much as you would, the majority of the people that follow brands can't afford those brands. And so you have to really start appealing to the people that are suffering at the moment, rather than the top parts of society that are saying that their quarantines are on top of hilltops in LA, or somewhere, on an isolated island somewhere where they can have a party at XYZ's house with fellow celebrities. So in a sense, there's a lot in the news about how celebrity is changing alongside fashion, and they go in hand, and that personal face of fashion, which is coming through social media, is really changing.
How was that look for you, Lara?
I'm just a small business. I mean, in terms of how it affects me.
And what you're putting out there, I mean, how it's affected you as a business, but as you've just said with some of the bigger brands, how are you representing?
So for me, it's I'm on a smaller scale, so it's more that instead of kind of posting necessarily about what I kind of am doing with my clients or anything like that, it's more about on a personal level, you know, how's your day-to-day going? And I spend my time thinking more and watching for when my colleagues aren't posting in case they're poorly and things like that. I'm not a prolific social media user. I mean, I used to be quite a lot at the beginning of my story, but since I've had Hector, I've had to calm it down a little bit. And yeah, for me, we've had requests in to kind of provide masks for London bus drivers. There's been a lot of London bus drivers that have kind of been struck down by coronavirus and actually died. And so it's been a case of like looking through your stocks to see whether or not you have anything that you can donate. There's a lot of ventilators you use in what I work with. But and seeing, and within my small community, receiving messages to kind of see if you've got spare gloves that you've been used for painting and things like that. And because I work with a freelance workforce, so I don't have a studio that's always up and running. I always get people in, and so at the moment I don't have facilities to be creating lots of masks for people, but it's just seeing what you have in stock that necessarily you can donate to people that have the ability to get it out there a little bit better than someone like myself. I'm still quite, although my clients are quite large scale, I'm a small scale kind of business. So yeah, whatever you can do, you kind of have to do. And I get messages every day saying, does anybody have any N95 masks or kite marked masks and things like that? And just looking through like bags, trying to see if you've got anything that you can, you know, send off.
You mentioned there about things calm down because of Hector, and Hector being your 18 months. And so, you know, you said calm down because of Hector, but how was Hector having an 18-month, you know, kind of ramped things up at home and being in, you know, lockdown in that environment as a mother and a family?
So, I kind of like, I've had a bit of prep. Hector is my 18-month-old. He's a gorgeous, very active little boy. But I've worked throughout my maternity. So when I had him, I'm not on maternity anymore. So it kind of gave me a little bit of practice of working from home. But yeah, it's just when you've got in isolate, like currently when you've got an 18-month-old, like we're currently doing the interview during his nap. So you have to time and schedule everything, because otherwise he wants to try it on. He wants to, you know, he likes crystals as much as I do because they're shiny. So if you get anything that's shiny out, he'll try and put it on. And then if he can't put it on, he'll try and, you know, take it apart, destroy it, glue something, you know, paint, get a pen, steal one of your pens, go and paint the wardrobe. You know, you have to kind of keep an eye on him. But in a way, when I was working through my maternity, I didn't stop, because in a sense, when I had this, when I had Hector, or when I was pregnant, I was worried that I would be sidelined a little bit by having a child. It was a concern that a lot of my female friends have, that are designers, that once you become a mother, that you enter this different category of, you know, you're not this nubile kind of, you know, youth anymore, or you're not going to be embodying the cutting edge. You know, it's something I think women have a pressure on them, that they've got to kind of maintain this outward appearance of this, that you're.
Where do you think that pressure comes from?
I don't know. You know, I didn't really know it until I suddenly became a mum. And I don't know whether or not it's just something that's kind of embedded in society already. Maybe it's just the idea of the mother versus the idea of the kind of the young woman or the young person. And I think it does come from the fact that fashion is always meant to be this, always on the vanguard, you know, it's always at the forefront of everything. And in a sense, when you start to prioritize things other than fashion, because you live, work, fashion, but it's or you change, and as your priorities change, I guess. I don't know where it comes from. It's just maybe not just a personal thing for me. I mean, I know it's true for other friends, and that I had recommendations from business advisors, etc., that your child, don't post pictures about just your child on its own. You have to kind of, it's okay if they're an accessory, but don't post a picture of Hector on his own on your Instagram. You'll lose followers, and it's something that's an issue that I'm working through, but also other young women that have babies in my industry have to work through as well. And because of that, anyway, when I sorry, I stopped.
No, we just lost some of the quality there.
We've got a little bit of a connection issue, so hopefully we'll come out the other end. It must be the Lord in London, because I know you're based. There we go. We've got you back. Well, based on it.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say. So on that, you were saying how like the industry was kind of wanting you to portray yourself as something different as to who you now are, almost without the mum title.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I wasn't really saying that, but I was just saying that I had advisors that have said, like, if you're posting pictures on the advertising your brand, that your child is an accessory. Don't put a picture on his own. You'll lose followers. And it's because I think a lot of maybe it's because a lot of the market that like your work don't relate to people having children, or maybe it's, I think actually I'm going to change that now, and I think it's changing for the benefit, but for because you have celebrities like Kylie Jenner who are young mums, and you've got your Kim Kardashians, and you've got what's her name, very kind of Farragut, I forgot her name. She's a very famous Italian brand and social media influencer that has a young child, and that's it's changing, and it's becoming more welcoming to young mums. But I think in society it used to be like young mum, and they just don't want you to go into this place where your audience doesn't connect with you anymore, because they don't see you as, they see themselves more as being the child rather than an adult.
So it
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying, like with this with the virus, how it's affecting sort of like the larger fashion houses, in that they're having to be more honest in their representation now. The masks of this is what we're doing and this is how we're looking, when it is, everyone knows it's not the reality. It can't. We're all in this reality together. You
need a team to make you look like that every day.
Yeah.
Your team's in isolation, so actually.
And obviously you get. I think it was Louis Vuitton started making the masks recently. Do you think that this change to a more honest sort of like representation, and including motherhood within the industry, do you think that can and will continue after the virus? Do you think it's had an almost like resetting kind of? Could you go back? Is what I mean.
Is it like the Reformation versus the Renaissance? Like, I think always. Because, if you look at how during the French Revolution, all of that public said, we don't want the idea of excess in society and inequality of wealth. We don't want to look at people with grand wigs with feathers coming out of their hat, and we don't want to produce costumes which cost, 5 people's living a year for them to wear. And look at where we've just been. You've got dresses going down the catwalk in Haute Couture Fashion Week now, which would have been what the Marie Antoinettes of their day were wearing. I think society always goes, and it's usually, it has a paradigm shift. So it's usually to do with like a historical event, like a revolution, politics, disease, you know, but you do end up having the canvas stripped back. But people are very kind of always ready to repaint the spectacle, because what you get with, I mean, I read a lot of situationalist work in art, and of a writer called like Guy Debord, and he writes about the spectacle and in society, and how as much as people live reality and they live death and life, and they have poverty and realism, the only way that you can promote capitalism is through consumption. And through the only way that people focus on consumption is by forgetting about the important things in life, which are, as you're going to die, you've got people that you love. And so unless we suddenly become less of a capitalist society, which I think we're going to have to move into anyway, the spectacle that you can live forever, and that beauty is everything, is always going to be promoted, because without that you don't have consumption. So maybe because we are looking at the world in the sense that consumerization in the way that we've had it has to change, otherwise the world will die. But then it's whether or not that will actually ever happen, because, you know, people are in isolation, but they're still kind of buying crap off Amazon and making somebody deliver it for them. They're still buying, you know, there's still that whole thing about ASOS, you know, the fact that their workers were saying it's unsafe, and that they've received more orders off ASOS than they've ever received before. Right. Because people are just home bored wanting to consume, and yes, they might be saving the environment by being indoors, but they're still not being that responsible in what they're going to do. I think at the end of the day, it just boils down to the human nature. And well, I don't know whether some people would say that people are predominantly good, but they have if they see somebody else doing something, then they copy. And so as long as people have personal freedom, someone is always going to do something that's a little bit naughty, and then everybody else will follow suit a little bit more. So I don't know, society has gone through many times of reformation where we stripped it back, but there's always been a renaissance. So maybe this is going to cause a little bit of a reformation for us. It's going to make us remember that we die. It's going to remember that, but then this is our generation's war. Sorry, somebody's doing DIY upstairs. Generations previously, you'd think that after the Second World War, they did go back to a, you know, more of a Labour ruling after the Second World War. You know, they built up houses for people. You had the NHS put into place. You know, that was born from world wars, is, you know, that people had these basic rights to be looked after and cared for. But then where have we ended up now? I'm sure the NHS is going to be invested in far more than it ever has after this. But before that, it had to get to a situation where it was under threat. And so you need to have in history these paradigm shifts, and they always happen after historical events. Whether it be a war, whether or not it's just London burning down or anything like. And so we're going to go through another paradigm shift, but we will end up, without being a pessimist, probably in another 100 years in another pickle, because we forget about it. It only takes a couple of generations to forget about, you know. Look at the millennials at the moment. They, you know, have no experience of anything, in the UK at least, of anything really going badly for them in their lives. So this is actually going to give a lot of people a shock. Yeah. And hopefully, as you say, But the fashion industry is always going to be there to answer the decadent needs of the people whenever they need it, I guess. So it is a frivolity, I think. So it's hard to kind of be on the frivolous end of society. What can you do? You can make masks, you can look at your stocks, you can entertain people possibly, but it's hard to entertain people when they're losing people. So, yeah. Mm.
I'm glad, Lara, you mentioned millennials, because that takes us on to very nicely to what I was going to be asking next was, because I know your backstory, and I just mentioned to Phil, I touched on that a little bit, but when it comes to millennials, and certainly entitlement, and I imagine that's rife in the fashion world, and I know, just give us a bit of insight into your backstory. And if I remember rightly, there was a couple of years, was it, that you just dedicated yourself, everything about you, time, effort, commitment, literally blood, sweat and tears to gain experience. And was that working with someone, was that with a key figure? I mean, if you just kind of refresh that for me, but for our audience, because it's a story.
I guess in fashion, so when I first started working in the fashion industry, I just graduated I was about to graduate in 2008 for my master's in costume design for performance. But unfortunately, 2008 was I'd gone for an interview. I was going to do this job with this great theatre company, and I was going to be their, what was it called? Concept artist, because I draw and stuff. So I'd had this good and they were like, I remember my tutor saying, you go for the interview, but you're not going to get the job, Lara. And I managed it. I got this job, but I was going to start when I finished my end of my course. And then everything got cancelled because of the recession and the big stock collapse. And so I graduated beginning of 2009. And for arts jobs, I mean, especially if you come out in costume design, the arts council had hardly any money. There were lots of theatre shows and planned events which were being shut down because they didn't receive their grants or their sponsorship anymore. And so it didn't seem to be quite the right industry to kind of be entering, nor was really fashion at the time. But I'd met in 2000, when I think it was 2008. So I'd met this young designer called Charlie Lamindu on Facebook, and I'd met him because I'd seen that he had cut and dyed this guy's hair, and I couldn't afford a haircut. I couldn't afford, let alone a hair colour, because he charged at the time, like £150 or something. And I remember thinking, oh my word, that's a lot. And so I messaged him on Facebook. This is when I went through time on Facebook. Everybody's a bit more cautious about social media, but at first it used to be add as many people as you could to your Facebook as possible to see who all these interesting people were you would never, and I would have I think I still do, because I very rarely use Facebook anymore, and I really, unless it's to do with work. I had designers that had had Boy George on my Facebook, and I had I was on his personal feed, and I had Jean-Charles de Castelbajac, who's a really kind of famous designer who I absolutely adore, but he just would accept your Facebook invite to kind of see what their life was every day. And so anyway, I added this designer, and I messaged him saying, look, I really want you to cut my hair and dye it, but I can't afford it. What can I do for you in return? And he said, oh, well, I'm running my show. I'm about to do a fashion week show, and I'm doing wigs and some clothes, and can you come and make me a cape? And I was like, oh yeah, well I can do, because that's what I'm training in. And he at that time was just making stuff. He was just this amazing creative, had all of these ideas, but he was in a position of being a hairdresser and or a haute couture hairstylist, and he didn't really have the knowledge to be able to kind of go. He was great in what he did, but he just needed an extra pair of hands and a guide to kind of go, like, look, if we want to make hair sculptures like this or that, I can do it. All right, I'll just do this. And so I worked with him as his first assistant on his first collection, and then a couple after that. And that was my entrance into the fashion world. And I did that because I literally couldn't get a job at that point. I remember if I got in cabs with him, you'd be talking to like you'd be talking to one of like the RBS bosses that was driving you around in a cab, or he had been like your delivery driver, and it was it Addison Lee? All of these Addison Lee drivers suddenly appeared because you still had your taxis, but they'd had like these really high flying jobs, and I'd been I remember, and the job centre sent out, because I had to sign on the dole, and I remember going to the job centre and they didn't know what to do with me. They were like, you've got an MA in costume design, so you fit in our category of having a higher education. And I remember being sat in a room with like all of these, and I was still working for Charlie at the time, and they were saying like, what's your biggest achievement in this room that you had to go and do your CV in for if you were fit into this higher skilled workforce kind of, you had to go to do your CVs for the job centre. And I'd be sat in a room with like all the RBS bosses that had just been fired from the Royal Bank of Scotland. And I'd be like, well, my biggest achievement was selling all of these mortgage things or these kind of assets at this price. But I currently can't advertise that because that's what's been scapegoated to have crippled the entire country. So my last 15 years of my career, nobody wants, because, so what do I do? And then I'd be like, oh, I'm just making something for London Fashion Week. And they'd just look at me like I was like a little alien. But they had no idea what to do with me. So they'd just send me to do all of these CVs all the time. Keep writing your CV for a job you're never going to get, because I'd basically trained for a freelance industry that didn't exist. Anyway, so I just stuck with Charlie. And then from working with him, I met stylists and bits and pieces, and we worked on a few jobs for Gaga together, but me under him, of course, under his instruction, because he's a fabulous designer. And then I kind of had to move on from that because we'd been together for a while, and then I knew that this is something that I loved, and I found that my skills from my costume design background really worked well in the fashion industry, because you had a lot of people that at that time wanted to make kind of quite unusual things, but the fashion at that time was very kind of flat pattern cut, and they didn't have these kind of skills that I maybe got from when I was a prop maker on films before then. And they kind of fed into this time, because if you think 2008, 2009, that's when Gaga first came on the scene. And so she really kept the whole of East London alive with her bank. Basically, she paid out for everybody to make work. And Charlie started to work with her. And then I worked with making something for another designer called Gemma Slack, who was one of the kind of designers at the time. And I made her a metal cage skirt that she wore. And from that making, they kind of started to ask me to do commissions. And I remember making all sorts of stuff for her at first, just to kind of show my handwriting and my style. And it just took off from there, really. And one of my first ever pieces I made, and it was alongside with Gemma Slack, we did a collaboration, and that was for Karl Lagerfeld for the Pirelli calendar. And we designed some bits and pieces together for it. And that was my first design break that Gemma gave me. And then, when you've got Karl Lagerfeld as your first client, and then it kind of goes kind of quite well from there. But Gaga really supported young designers, and there's so many things that so many people have made. She's got an archive somewhere that has never been accessed. So I remember making her this silicon brain headpiece that was transparent, that could be applied onto this, and all of this stuff. And she would over commission everything so that they'd have this amazing selection. So there's so many pieces from me and other designers that never got seen, but then you see occasionally you just keep working to get that little bit of press, and then eventually, so she to get commissioned by other people. And then I made some pieces for her, and then there was like Jessie J was quite big at the time, and I remember working on a piece for her, and then she broke her leg so it didn't get seen, and I'd made it, you know, you have to kind of keep going. And at that time, you know, you couldn't even get a bar job. So it was either you went to the Dole office having done nothing other than send CVs off all week, or you went to the Dole office with, you know, you weren't even really allowed to tell them that you'd been doing anything, because other than applying for work, because it would fall under labour. But you could go with your head held high thinking, well, you know, I might not have got a job, but I'm working towards getting a job. Mm-hmm. And so maybe some students, if there is a little bit of a financial crisis, they've got to see this as a time where a free time. Now you're sat in your living room to make and create and do something that when you come out the other side that you maybe didn't have the time to produce otherwise. Time is a precious commodity, and the government in a sense has just handed everybody time, and you can choose to use it however you want. But if you want to go somewhere, you know, seize it. And maybe as a young mum, I can't seize it as much as I would want to at the moment, because I've got like a couple of hours in between my day if I'm here without him being at nursery, which he's no longer at nursery. But I would really urge other people to kind of really reflect on this time and seize this time to kind of make everything, or even just draw what you would like to make, or do something with your time that you probably won't have this, well, hopefully you won't have it again for, you know, you only ever get time like this when you're at uni, that you can sit on a sofa, watch TV and make something. The rest of the time, you're just kind of trying to keep the wolf from the door. And creatively, I mean, you know, once you graduate, you spend a lot of your time making pieces that you don't really like, for people that you might not necessarily have wanted to work for like a KFC advert, or like, sorry KFC, you might have to edit that out. You know, personally love your food, but you know,
chicken suppliers and fast food restaurants are available.
Maybe just edit that out, because I shouldn't mention brands. But you know, you do there's a lot of stuff that you've got to do the money work, and as soon as you start getting a mortgage and you get your commitments, and you need to pay for your rent over your head, and it's not paid by mum or a student grant, you have to do the money work, and then that's when you get creative infringement of your time. So use this time well. I'm not using it as best as I should be, but I'm helping Hector create amazing Superman paintings, but
I can imagine.
They're quite good. I could possibly show you, but yeah, it's a good time for a lot of people to reassess what they actually want to do with their life. And if you've been fired, you know, fab, go apply for a job that you actually want to do maybe later, or go spend more time with mum and dad, because you know, people take things for granted.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we could talk for hours.
Sorry if I kept talking forever.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant, because just some of the stuff I'm sat here just going, that's absolutely. I'm thinking within myself about, actually, yeah, I should be doing that. So it's like phenomenal, really. It's amazing. We could speak for hours. Certainly, like, I know you've just worked with Madonna. I saw you work with Kylie Minogue, and there's lots of people like that. And I don't think it's a fair question to ask who's your favourite person you've worked with. I think that would be unfair, not something you could answer. However, what's what's a fond moment or memory of working with somebody in that kind of celebrity world? And what stands out to you, and that you can share with us?
A fond moment. That's a weird word. That's weird. I can think of funny moments. I remember doing a fitting and not being able to find Kylie Minogue in the room because she was below my eye level. So I could just...
And you're small, you're short.
Yeah.
You're short.
Well, I was doing deals at the time, so I could hear his gorgeous little voice just going, yeah, you just need to put a strap on it and it'll be fine. And I was like, so it's my terrible Australian accent. And I was looking in the room, trying to find out who was trying to talk to me, and I couldn't see her. I had to look down eventually, and then I found her. But there's lots of, I have more fond moments. Most of my work is extremely stressful. It's almost like afterwards you kind of just relax and go, God, that was quite good. But actually living it was like hell. But I think I get a buzz off the adrenaline. So actually fond moments tend to be when you've pulled something out the bag. Not that it's somebody's kind of, so I guess also with Kylie, when we went up to start her tour, not this one, the one before, when she, they changed the choreography. We'd spent 2 weeks making a headpiece for her in Swarovski crystal, and literally the choreography changed in the last 3 hours before going on stage. And so I had to make an entire new headpiece. We'd had a month to make the other, and then we had to make an entire new, I was in Liverpool, I didn't even know where to buy any materials, and
oh wow,
pull that out the bag. And that's it was quite a big press shot piece, and it was only a small little kind of pillbox hat covered in crystals and a net and some ostrich feathers, burnt peacock curl feathers. But to kind of know that you calmly just say, yeah, sure, that's fine. I could name drop. I just thought, okay, the best moment I've ever had is at Rock in Rio in Lisbon, having just I did some costumes for Fergie and Adam Lambert Queen, and it wasn't for the same concert, but it was dancing to Bohemian Rhapsody whilst headbanging with Fergie from the Black Eyed Peas on a hillside, because nobody else wanted to go and do it for her, whilst the lead singer Adam Lambert from Queen was wearing my jacket that I designed.
That's a way to finish it. That's a way to finish it. Lara, I mean, we must have a beer in the future at some point, whenever that may be. Let's lock down a few beers and just go just incredible. And your way of approaching life, and you translate that, it's just phenomenal. I think it's incredible. Where can people find you? Where can people check your work out, and website? So my website.
So this is terrible for your business. My website hasn't been updated in maybe about 10 years. Just FYI. So find me on Instagram. That's the best place. I'm not a TikToker yet, and but Instagram is the best place, and that's where you get the real me. I do post pictures of my dog and kids as well, contrary to advice. So maybe when I want to get different sorts of followers, I'll start changing that. But best place to find me, Instagram. And if anybody ever wants to kind of come down and work with me, just hit me up and DM me,
Brilliant.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, we'll put your social hooks in the in the copy as well, Lara. So thanks so much. It's always a pleasure connecting you with in many different ways. It's funny, we reconnected because I spotted there was a video on Facebook, and it's this guy in Africa. Phil knows the one. I put it on my feed, and he's this crazy designer that he's making costumes out of playing cards attached to him, and he's deconstructed a fan and put it on his head, and he's got his kids in buckets who are waving whilst he's pressing a keyboard. It's crazy.
Oh,
As soon as I saw that, I was like, Lara surely knows who this guy is, and if she doesn't, she's got to, like, because it's just like crazy. And I sent it your way, and you don't use Facebook, but in a positive way, you've got an alert, and then I had a WhatsApp message, and the rest is history, and here you are. So the positives of social media, I guess, and how we can connect with people that we haven't
I think it is.
for a long time.
You just got to put out good vibes and culture, good vibes in other people. I think just don't make them think that they're, they need things that they don't need.
Good vibes and culture. On that note, Lara Jensen.
Okay. The horrendous name drop at the end as well. Okay.
Thanks, Lara.
Cheers, Lara.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Business Lockdown.
Please comment, like, share and subscribe to help build our global community.
We look forward to seeing you all soon.